Okay, so Hums, welcome, and Falguni, welcome. So, Jai Jane, Falguni.
Jai Jain.
Jai Jane, where are you from, Falguni?
I'm from Indore.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, great. Thank you so much for joining. And also, Mrs. Soni has joined as well. So great. Jai Janain, everyone, and thank you so much for joining our last and final session. This has been a pilot and an amazing journey to have these conversations. And to begin, I will ask Yogen Bhai to start with a Namokar mantra, and then we will begin our conversation and discussion. So if you will, Yogen Bhai, to do a Namokar mantra for us to begin.
Great. For people who are new, let's take a moment, just a moment. Put a big smile on your face. And for the next hour or so, let's forget about all of the things that are happening and let's focus on this spiritual journey. Take a nice deep breath, inhale. Hold. And hold. And very slowly exhale. And let's do one Namokar mantra. Namo Ariyantanam, Namo Siddhanam, Namo Aidiyanam, Namo Vajjayanam, Namo Loe Sabsanam, So much Namokar, Sabha Pava Pranashno, Mangala Chisavisim, Paramam Havai Mangalam, Om Shanti Shanti.
Om Shanti Shanti.
Welcome, everybody.
Great. Welcome, and Jai Jinain, everyone. So we begin our conversation today, last and final conversation on the Jain practices. And I just want to make sure you can see my slides. We're going to be talking about the practices and how they lead to happiness and the practices where they come from. So let us begin with what we had talked about in our first session. So, Yogen Bhai, we talked about the Jain way of life. You and our team of people have worked on now the second edition. But if we were to ask, and I want to ask our folks here as well to sort of contemplate on this question. अपन ये सब जानते, अपन ने बातें करी कि जो जैन फिलॉसफी और जैन प्रिंसिपल्स हैं वो सब जैन पैथ के पे जा रहे हैं, तो जैन प्रैक्टिसेस, जैन वे ऑफ लाइफ क्या है? What is Jain way of life? Do you want to maybe explore that with us a little bit?
Yes, so I would love to hear a quick comment or feedback from our attendees. Does आप लोग क्या सोचते हैं Jain way of life क्या है? I'm sure आप लोग रोज you live a very strong Jain way of life. यदि आपसे कोई पूछे Jain way of life क्या है तो क्या बोलते हैं आप?
Maybe we'll ask. I know Vitika is there, Abhinav is there. They've been working on this, sharing. So what do you guys think? Yeah, go ahead, Vitika, if you can share what your thoughts on Jain way of life. You're on mute, so we're not able to hear you. So maybe Abhinav, if you can unmute. Or Leena ji.
Well, while they're doing that, the answer is actually not easy. It's a very complicated and long answer.
I agree with Yogen sir. Hi, my name is Vitika, and I'm working with Jain path of journey with Dr. Manoj and Yogen sir.
Yes. So tell us, Vitika, in your opinion, so what is the Jain way of life?
Jain way of life, in my opinion, is like it's not actually basically following all the rituals and all. It is just practicing small things in our daily life, which will help us enhance our ourselves as well. हम अपने आप को कैसे improve कर सकते हैं, हम कैसे अपने आप में changes ला सकते हैं positivity के साथ. जस्ट हमारी नॉर्मल छोटी छोटी चीज़ों को बदल कर हम अपने फैमिली, अपना एनवायरनमेंट, अपने आप को कैसे पॉजिटिव रख सकते हैं. That is what Jain way of life is all about.
Okay.
Very nicely put. हम आपको एक एग्जांपल देते हैं. यदि आप कोई टीवी खरीदते हैं या कोई नया प्रोडक्ट खरीदते हैं, उसके साथ एक मैनुअल आती है, इंस्ट्रक्शन मैनुअल. जब अपन बोर्न होते हैं तो अपनी इंस्ट्रक्शन मैनुअल अपने पेरेंट्स के थ्रू, अपने रिलीजन के थ्रू, अपने मुनि एंड साधु मुनीज के थ्रू आती है, और इवन साइंस के थ्रू आती है. So actually this book was originally was written as an instruction manual for us, for our lives, and it permeates throughout our life. And a lot of things that अपन लोगों को formal introduction या learning नहीं हुआ to our parents, but now if we can document it in the Jain context, that is what the formalization of Jain way of life. But Manoj,
yes, so I get it.
Done a survey.
Yeah, tell me about the survey. So first of all, it is good to document कि Jain way of life को एक instruction manual बना रहे हैं. We're making an instruction manual to help people guide what the principles, the practices and philosophies are. But we are already following them, are we not?
You're right. Exactly. If you look over here, we had done a 1,600 people responded to our survey. We did this in North America last year. And you know what? The good news, all Jains, majority of the Jains, and this are honest, not angry, not greedy. I mean, they're almost perfect souls. Imagine that. I don't even think अपन को ये कोई सेमिनार की जरूरत है.
Right.
क्योंकि अपन सब सोचते हैं कि हमको सब कुछ मालूम है, ये है, काफी लेक्चर सुन लिया, ये सुन लिया.
Right.
But when अपन थोड़ा deeper देखते हैं,
yeah,
half of the Jains do eat cakes and pastries. Half the Jains do drink alcohol a little bit. Majority of the Jains leather use करते हैं, सोचते नहीं है कब leather की चीज नहीं करें. Yeah. Very few, only less than half are vegan diet. And so अपन superficial level पर अपन सोचते अपन ये सब कर रहे हैं, परंतु जब practices में होता है, अपनी habits change नहीं हुई है.
Got it. So any comments from people on that? If anyone wants to add or thoughts or comments? Is this, do you find this is a similar case in India? कि अपन बोलते हैं कि अपन काफी चीजें कर रहे हैं, but in depth we may not be doing it or not realizing it. Leena ji, what is your thoughts on that? Is this something?
Yeah. I practice में नहीं है. Still people practice. Yeah, they feel that they are not greedy, they are selfless, but actually it is not.
Yeah.
Correct. So, and Manoj, I want to thank you, Leena ji, for that. और ये जो last comment है on that slide, 75% of the Jains, at least in the US, will marry a non-Jain, Indian vegetarian. So think about the Jain core. यदि अपनी Jain core strong नहीं हो and अपन marry non-Jain, we have to strengthen our core, strengthen our habits to make sure that the whole family follows the Jain path. Anyways, right. Didn't want to dwell on that too much, but wanted to set the context of why we should be thinking about the Jain way of life, even though we think we know it.
It's great. So, अपन ने Jain path का जो symbol है वो change कर दिया है. It was an arrow, and now we have changed it to this. अपन ने बातें करी कि Jain philosophy leads to Jain principles, the triple A's. We've talked about the triple A's. आज अपन बातें करेंगे कि क्या Jain practices हैं. What are the Jain practices and how can we fit our minds around all of these many practices? So let us begin with the first set of practices. There are we've sort of from looking at the scriptures, 24 distinct practices. 8 of them come from ahimsa, 8 from anekantvad, and 8 from aparigraha. And let us spend a little bit of time on each one. So these are the ahimsa practices, jo non-violence se aati hai. And they are obviously vegetarian diet, forgiveness, compassion, service, yoga, exercise, carefulness, intoxicant-free, and stress-free. There's a lot of the stuff here, but we'll go them piece by piece. But what we want to do is to put them into context. तो ये 8 practices के बारे में अपन पहले बातें करेंगे और अपन इनको देख सकते हैं first in a way that this is non-violence towards others and non-violence towards the self. So Yogan Bhai, if we look at this, vegetarian, forgiveness, compassion, this is non-violence towards others. And this all is non-violence towards the self. याद है अपन ने वो self की देखी थी कि being non-violent to the self, why should we not do drugs, smoke, alcohol? Because it harms the self. So these are things that are impacting our day-to-day. So I want to take a minute and then we're going to go through 24 of these slides. Now, I know this may seem a little complicated and detailed, but it is going to help us. So I'm going to pause here for a few minutes and have us sort of absorb what we're going to see in a set of slides which are going to come. So Yogan Bhai, you can see that we're talking about the first set of practices. So this is not philosophy, this is not principles, but ye practices hain. This comes from non-violence. The color tells you that as well, the light blue color. Or fir we'll talk about what is the meaning, and then what scriptures and the science benefits. So first, even before we get into the detail, I want to ask people, when you are vegetarian, आप जब decide करते हैं कि नहीं मैं घर में मीट नहीं खाऊंगा, मैं घर में अंडा नहीं लाऊंगा, when you do make those decisions, where do those decisions come from? From maybe the scriptures? And are there scientific benefits? Because science plays a very strong role in our lives. We take medicine, we do things that science tells us, we get vaccinated. So I want to pause with that and ask people, does this structure, the construct of our conversation for a practice work? Is this something that people think is helpful to better understand the Jain practices? So thoughts, comments, and I know Pallavi is there also. What do you think of this type of a construct for each of the practices? Yeah?
Yeah, so if I can come in.
Yeah, please.
So I think, I'm sorry, I've been like also on the other phone for some other reason. So I'm just like half here, but so, you know, I think about the vegetarianism, I think the meaning is the most important, and the benefits which, you know, which are to the body, etc., are secondary. They happen, that's good. But I think the conviction has to come about, you know, from the point of view of less violence and respect towards all other living beings. I think, and the way we are seeing the younger generation, I think they understand this much better, because the benefits of science and the reduced heart disease, etc., is basically a good outcome of it, but it cannot be the main motivating force. Otherwise, because that means that you're doing it again out of self love or self interest, but not because of the interest of everybody else in general. So I think to me, the main meaning has to be about respect for all other forms of life.
Great. So what is really driving here are multiple factors, right? You have at one level, you have the scriptures, which are there, which is at the initial is the fundamental aspect of why we are vegetarian, our respect for nonviolence. Then where it says in the scriptures, and then the collateral gain, right? It's not the main reason, but for some collateral gain. Leena ji, you had a comment also, please. Leena ji, if you can unmute. Yeah.
Children basically follow what they have seen in their families. 90% of the time, children follow what they have seen in their families. So it is more of that for this particular thing, not eating meat and not drinking or anything. This 90%, 95% follow what they have seen in the house. So I think that is important. And I have seen Gujarati don't eat potato, onion, garlic from their childhood. So they don't eat in their adulthood also.
Right. So this is the behavior change theory, right? That we can change people's knowledge and attitude. Behavior change is a huge cultural, and it takes time to do this. We're not asking people to change their behaviors at the moment. We're making them aware of these practices that are there. So,
but Manoj, we do also should keep in mind that we shouldn't blindly follow practices that were there 2,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago, because same things may not apply now and things may have changed.
Sure.
Right. And so especially when it comes to vegan diet, transitioning towards that is, we all sort of agree that a lot of people agree that that is the optimal diet from the ahimsic point of view. So
sure. So
and we should be ready to follow and to based on not only science evidence, but also our thinking as to how the modern world has changed and how dairy processing is taking place.
Okay, so now we have 24 practices to be talking about, and we begin with their meaning, then scriptures and the science benefits. There's another practice in our tradition of forgiveness, and it really talks about our anger and overcoming anger and realizing that anger is a form of mental violence. I'll share a story. So the grandson of Mahatma Gandhi, Arun Gandhi, was here just 2 days ago, and we had many discussions. We've been working with him for 2 decades on an annual conference on nonviolence in Memphis and in the region. And what he said, what really struck me, he said 80% of the violence, they did a study at Harvard, and he said 80% of the violence comes from anger. Just sheer anger is what's driving that violence. And how does one overcome in our religion is this whole idea of forgiveness. And that forgiveness has 2 components: asking for forgiveness and giving someone else forgiveness. And there's great depth in it, but we want to say that. And it is written very clearly in our scriptures in Tattva Sutra. I forgive all creatures. I cultivate friendliness with all. I harbor resentment for none. And then there's also sheer evidence from science as well. Any thoughts or comments on the second practice of ahimsa? So this may seem, again, a lot of it is, yes, we're there, but now look at it in the totality of what we're doing. Again, realizing the anger and its impact on our brain, and on our body. The sages 2000 years ago didn't know this, but what is very clear is that they saw the impact of that anger on our bodies. Yogan Bhai, any comments or questions on this?
No, I'm incredibly impressed that without the deep scientific knowledge, our sages have had such insight about human behavior and human mind. And it's so heartwarming to be part of the Jain tradition and Jain way of life.
Yeah, and this is something that we can tell our children as well. The third practice, compassion, right? So where does compassion, what does it mean, right? Compassion is, yes, love for all, but it also is something which is beyond pity, beyond sympathy, beyond empathy. It is something that moves us. And very clearly in our scriptures, it is written word for word. And what is really amazing is where science falls on compassion as well. I work on this topic with medical students and how to bring them and make them more compassionate. I've done a long piece in the Washington Post on this whole idea of how do we become more compassionate individuals. And it is through the practices Jainism teaches us: self-reflection, self-awareness, and certainly meditation is helping there. So another set of practices. Any comments or thoughts from folks on this? And
Manoj, compassion is, a lot of us have compassion, but actually putting it to work is not such a strong suit, I believe, for a lot of the Jains. It's easy to give money, right? I mean, it's not easy, but hard-earned money. So this is actually quite important.
Absolutely. Next is our practice of service, right? So what we see is our scriptures are very clear. That's this is my by far the favorite quote from Tattva Sutra: souls render services to one another. And service can be done for gaining money or for other gains. That is still service. But the greatest service is when we have no expectations. And the funniest thing, or what may be very, people may not be aware, that doing service for others decreases our blood pressure, reduces the hormones, stress hormones, and boosts the good hormones. So simple things that's in our scriptures can have profound effect on our bodies and our mind. So what we have done is, at the moment, we have covered in the practices of nonviolence. We have talked about nonviolence towards others, or अब अपन बातें करेंगे कि nonviolence about the self. So any thoughts or comments from the group about how we are developing, unfolding the Jain practices? Have you thought, maybe let's take a minute, and क्या आप जब जैन धर्म की practices, day-to-day practices जो होती है, उसके बारे में सोचते हैं? Do you think about it in this level of the
granularity,
in that level of granularity and the depth as well? Comments, thoughts?
Hello.
Yeah, please, Hitesh, go ahead.
Yeah, Dr. Manoj ji.
Yes. You may have two devices on. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can put one of them on mute and then we can hear you.
Yeah. You can put on mute.
You have to put speaker and
No, yeah. Are you able to hear me clearly?
Yeah. Now we can hear you. Go ahead.
Hello.
Yeah. Please go ahead. Yeah, you can hear you.
Hello.
Yeah. Now we're good. Yep. Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead. We may not be okay. Yeah, go ahead. We can hear you. Yeah, Hitesh, we can hear you. So
Actually, we can.
Hello. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
So yeah. So no, I think first of all, I would just take a minute to congratulate you on organizing such a wonderful workshop. It has been, I think, eye opener to us, and I think all these 4 sessions were very beautifully designed. And I think what you are saying is absolutely correct. We have not gone into such granularity of things, so we may be practicing something, but we have not been able to connect and take a wholesome picture on the Jain practice of living. Maybe we may be doing something, and something we are doing because we have been brought up in the Jain family, and of course certain things like non-violence and non-hoarding. But I think the important point is that this whole sessions has helped us to get more clarity on different aspects, and I think we will become more self-aware and self-practice all these concepts. And I think this was a very wonderful initiative on your part, and even Yogendra Bhai have been very, very, his comments, I have been hearing it, were very making it more clear to us. And I'm sure everybody has got benefit out of these 4 sessions, even when
So Hitesh, I wanted to ask you,
yeah,
thank you for the feedback.
Yeah.
Some people say that Jainism is very complicated.
Yeah.
So many of do's and don'ts and it just is very complicated. And now we're breaking this down in 24 other things. What do you say to them when they say that, oh my God, look at all these practices, it's so prescriptive? Aap kya sochte hain?
No, I think it's not that complicated. Let me tell you, it's very simple. I think one needs to just become aware of those practices. And I think generally it is not only Jain. I think some of the practices I have found in so many other religions also, right? So it is not necessary that only Jain. I have so many friends, and I think most of them are following a lot of principles of Jainism, right? So
yes, quite a
so
bit.
my comment will be is that we have to just become aware. Maybe non-vegetarian is something which is a very debatable. In some religion it is allowed, in Jain it is not allowed, but I think most of the practices which Jain has, I think different religions also follows almost the same practices. It is, I think what we have seen is, and I think this is a very, because the kind of environment we are living in, I think the kind of digital environment we are living in and social environment we are living in, it has put so much pressure on different walks of life, that people have tend to forget this, So I think I am talking more from India perspective, that, we have not following these basic principles the way it has to be followed, right? So
yeah.
I would say it is simple. I will not say it is terms may be complicated, but I think the basic core philosophy of Jain way of living is very simple. I think we need to just pay attention to these things, and hopefully I think and it's a process. Another thing is that whatever we have learned during these 4 days, we have to follow this, we have to practice it, right?
Yeah,
learning is one thing, practicing is very important. I think practicing is something we have to do. I am sure it's a process. I don't think we will be able to, even if we are able to follow 60-70%, I think it is a commendable job, right? So
yep, absolutely. And Falguni ji had a comment as well, so you can unmute.
Yes,
Falguni ji.
I just would like to add to all these things that we as at this age, like around 40 plus or say 50 plus, we are all following 70% or maybe 80%. But the challenge is with our kids to make them, they have so much of peer pressure once they go out of the house to study abroad or to study at any state. At that time, especially for smoking and drinking, there'll be so much of peer pressure that it is difficult unless they have been given proper maybe sanskar you say, or the reason why we should not go for it. Like my daughter, she is in fourth year BDS. She's doing from Baroda. But when she was going out from my home, like after 12, she herself went to Mara Sahib, and she only said, Mara Sahib, I want you to give me this slogan that I will not do any of these like drinking or drugs or smoking or any which are not good these things. And
Sure.
Bharat asked her that, is this your parent who is forcing you? Well, no, I'm doing it myself. So I am blessed in that way. The same like when my son will go out, this is a difference maybe with girl and boy also. But I don't know, like Abibi, he is like, Mama, you know me. Yeah, I'm not doing it now. So don't worry. I know what is right and what is wrong. So that is a challenge for as a parent, what we'll face. We have been brought up like that, so we have understood that this is not good and this is not, like, they don't eat even the cake which has egg. They don't eat it. They ask, otherwise they will not eat it. When we went to US, my son was around 10 years or 12, 10 11 years, and my daughter was 12 years, something like that. They never used to have cookies also which had egg. They would ask first and then. So that is important.
Sure.
Yeah,
very good.
I would like to just one add point to this. See what children follow us, right? So if we do practice certain things, right? Suppose let's say we are not eating potato or onion, right? Then probably, you know, the children are going to also follow us, right? So I think what I have seen is that whatever I am doing, my children are also doing it. If I am not following up, I think the basic responsibility lies on the parents. Probably, I think they look at the parents, how they have followed up this Jain way of living. Probably, I would not say all, but I think they will mostly follow us in this aspect. So that is what my understanding. Yeah,
absolutely. So I want to highlight the fact here. What we are presenting, what we're sharing with you is really something which we believe, and we don't know, but you will tell us in ways could and should resonate with the younger generation. If I would just request the following: you take the PowerPoint presentations and you share it with them and say, you know, here's another way of looking at Jainism. Here's another way that you may be able to relate with, in how Jainism has the science benefits, how we can take ahimsa and divide it up into these practices. And non-violence towards the self is what you're really avoiding when you're not smoking or drinking. And so I want to take time, and we've got lots of other practices I want to go through, but just this is a broad look, but great conversation here. Then the other practice is the practice of carefulness in our speech action. That's what Jain Samitis and Guptis are really about, that we have to be careful in what we are doing. And you know, in the business world, they will learn, our kids, and we have learned, think before you speak and think before you act. And definitely these make a big difference in that broad world. Again, we've talked about the intoxicant free. It is very clear from the scriptures, and we know that alcohol, smoking, and drugs are one of the leading causes of death, and that they can be prevented, and that we should prevent them. They are also addictive as well, and all part of our religion. And then we shouldn't understate the other fact that we all live a stressful life, that we need to be thinking about our tradition, our religion says that we need to have composure, that we need to be away from negative thoughts. And it helps us in so many ways. This is our path, our journey to happiness.
And Manoj, you're the doctor here, but we know that stress is a major factor in so many diseases.
Major factor, and our religion provides the many paths by which we can overcome the anger, the stress, through our practice, by everything from managing our ego to the diet. Okay, so we talked about the 8 practices, which
We have to
are
move fast.
yes, we will. But this is, people will have access to the slides and the content. Now let's talk about 8 practices which come from अनेकांतवाद. अपन ने जो अहिंसा के बारे में बातें कर ली, and then अनेकांतवाद से क्या-क्या आता है, right? So we have open-mindedness, meditation, respect, and gratitude. So, and humility. These are all things that अनेकांतवाद provides. Also, straightforwardness, scripture reading, equity, and prayers and puja and rituals. So let us go into each one of these in a similar way. How we can break them down is the following. The first 3 relate with anekantvad or non-absolutism in our thought. How we think, being open-minded, being meditation, doing respect, that is non-absolutism. Then there's non-absolutism in our speech, how I speak. If I talk I, me, versus us, we, simple words, humility, speaking, straightforwardness, am I deceitful? And then non-absolutism in our actions, which comes in the scriptures, the equity, and the prayers and puja and others that we can do. So now let us explore the practices, right? So these are examples of how our day-to-day lives we have. And if you recall, the questions that we asked, that we said for self-reflection, each of the questions came from each of these practices. So open-mindedness. Yogan Bhai, I think this is by far one of the most important principles, practice that comes from the principle of Anekantvad.
But by far, we all know that even in our relationships, not just at work, and we know at work also, it's so important. If you're a leader, you have to be open-mindedness. So I think you all understand that. Putting into practice requires a lot of brain cells, and we all have that. And we have 24 hours in a day to practice a lot of these things. We were saying there are 24 of these. It's not like you all have to do it in the same hour, but we do have a lot of time and energy to think and contemplate. So please, open-mindedness, I think, is by far the most critical one.
And we know that this is a
this.
problem. Yes, this is a problem amongst everyone. So I am so happy to know that out of all the different religions I was raised in the only one that holds the real truth. And yes, we as Jains are also of that mindset that that is on there. But what's amazing is that Jainism says you have to listen, you have to learn and explore others. The second principle, which I think is a foundational practice, is that of meditation and mindfulness. This is awareness, self-reflection tool. And I think we have underestimated that power, and our scriptures way of telling us what was so important. On this topic, I have done a great, and we have done a tremendous amount of research, different types of meditation.
You have given seminars to a lot of the physicians on this, right? The Center of Disease Control here.
Yeah, for CDC, we've done the training for a lot of their employees. There alag-alag tarah ki meditations hote hain, and each one has a different impact. We've done a whole book on mindfulness and awareness as well. The idea is that there's tremendous amount of information there in that practice. This is important. I know, Yogan Bhai, you talk a lot about respect and gratitude. Share with us why you think respect and gratitude is an important practice.
It's humbling. It reduces your ego. Every morning before I put my foot down, on the ground when I get out of bed, I give gratitude to 5 people, doesn't matter, or 5 living beings, let's say. And I find that to be such a disarming exercise, such a relaxing exercise, and appreciation of the beauty of the world and people that are surrounding us, that make our lives not only worthwhile living, interesting, but also possible.
Yeah, and it makes us happier, psychological well-being, positive emotions, all of that. And our scriptures are very clear. Tattva Sutra, the 4 reverences, respect, are for learning, the enlightened worldview, Samyak Darshan, good conduct, and senior ascetics as well. So you can see that respect and gratitude are very much changed. And how that impacts us are actually chemicals, the dopamine, serotonin, all of them are changed. This is a list of all of the articles that provide that information. Gratitude is changing our brain, and it is in our Jain practice, and then we need to be using that. Humility.
And it doesn't cost anything. It doesn't take up a lot of time, doesn't take up a lot of energy.
Actually, that's the amazing thing about so many of these practices that we're talking about is it doesn't require any great effort on our part other than our attention and then becoming more in tuned to it. And it changes our life. It makes us more, if for any simpler word, happy and equanimity, and then the path to moksha as well. So humility, part of the 10 dharmas, that's where it comes from. And we know that there's a constant battle between our ego and its desire to be upfront and then the nature of what we want to be. And that humility is the way to tame that ego, to better understand, and it helps us work with the world as well. So that's the other practice, practice of straightforwardness. Another major practice from the Jain scriptures, 9.6, the Tattva Sutra, straightforwardness is sincere and honest intentions. And we know that the scientific benefits as well. And then those non-absolutism practices that come from action. These were from our thoughts and speech, scripture reading, equity, and prayer. We shouldn't underrate or not prioritize the benefits of scriptures and spiritual readings. We have multiple studies have done on religion and science, and they have shown that the scriptures and the religious path and or the spiritual path is beneficial. And we know that. And Tattva Sutra very clearly says that as well. And then we're talking about looking at the big picture as well. So
Manoj, and I wanted to share with you that reading other spiritual content, even non-Jain ones, could strengthen our understanding of not only about ourselves, but give a different perspective to our Jain view. For example, there was a book, a whole series book called Conversation with God, and wasn't Jain context, but it gave me a much stronger insight in Jainism.
Yeah, exactly. The other, for Anekantwad, we talked about, equality and equity. And really, the whole idea that our society is beginning to understand how stereotyping and bias, prejudice, and discrimination work. And we're moving towards income inequality, racial equality, gender equality, religious equality, all of this, which is happening. Our sages, centuries ago, saw this and said it was important.
Hey, Manoj, I have a question as a clinician. If you go back to the slide, people say, or we know that we're hardwired for stereotyping, bias, prejudice, right? Our brains are hardwired. What do we need to do to be able to practice in the Kanban and not be slaves to the hardwiring?
Right. So again, this has been a topic of many of my writings as well. And one area is that you have to slow down and observe. If they've done a bunch of tests, again, an entire team at Harvard did have a self-test of bias. And what they find is that we would lean towards people who are like us, who look like us, and we would lean against people who don't look like us. We lean towards people of our religion, of our tradition, so forth. The way to avoid is not to generalize, to take a moment and say, you know what, I may be being biased in approaching this individual. And so I think those are real life ways that one can do. I try to do that same way is when I'm talking to somebody, I sort of ask myself, what is it that is leading me in that conversation? So self-evaluation, self-perspective, self-reflection is the way to overcome bias. So important point. Going to the next practice and really important part of our life is the rituals. I don't want to undermine the scripture reading and the rituals. They are practices which lead us into that path. The scriptures tell us about them. And yes, they help
these
us.
are very important, especially because there's symbolism of our triple A's.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
You know,
Absolutely.
when we're doing the prayers, when we're chawal chada rahe hain, ya we're doing something, it's symbolism.
Exactly. So we've covered now 16 practices, 8 more practices to get to the 24 that we've been talking about. And the last set are from aparigraha practices. And these are the most challenging ones I find. Then we talk about aparigraha, and we'll talk about balancing our needs and wants. So we can talk about aparigraha, non-possessiveness towards the mind, the body, and then social causes as well. So certainly the mind is what determines the balancing of needs and wants and the contentment. It's all a mind game. Body is the fasting and the penance and the sensual control and the art of dying. And then certainly the society is where aparigraha, when one gives charity and cares for the environment. Let's take a look at these 3, the last 8 practices that affect the mind, the body, and the social causes, and then we'll finish up. You know, balancing needs and wants is not something easy. Yes, there are food, shelter, our basic needs, but jewelry, diamonds, those are wants. How does one balance them? How does one not be greedy? And being able to distinguish that. Our religion talks about that, and we know that it's the greed, the expectation, which leads to that. We can even look at this as we did earlier, basic needs, and then necessity, comforts, wants, and then greed. Where our desire, if I want an iPhone, is it a basic need, or is this a want? Or if I want 3 iPhones, is that a greed? If I want a luxurious car, is that just a comfort? Where does it fit in this continuum? There are no right answers to this. There are just answers and questions that we can potentially ask to get to the depth. And I really believe—
Manoj, you're making me feel awkward here, because yesterday I went to the Apple store to see the new phone that just came out.
Yes, I know. So yes, I mean, it's very true. And there are no right answers, not that you should have not have bought that new iPhone. But what is the right answer is that you took time, I hope, to see where you were in this spectrum and see how valuable. The other is contentment. What is it? And we know contentment is really hard. We know when we compare ourselves to others, if they have 2 cars, if they have a better car, if they have a bigger place, that creates enviness, jealousy. Contentment is a way of helping us put out that fire of jealousy. And it is it is completely learned. It is that calmness of the mind for especially in material desires. And then those aparigraha for that is related to fasting. Jainism very much talks about that. So that's the practice of fasting. Penance, we know self-restraint. Again, from the 10 dharmas, it's the austerity one. It really does is rewires our brain in doing that. And managing sensual desire, brahmacharya, and all of the things that the Jain tradition talks about, it is part and parcel of a healthy and a balanced life.
And just, I think it's important for us to keep in mind that it is just not about sensual pleasures. It's also obsession with food and activities at the risk of ignoring a balanced and healthy life, right? We all know what a balanced and healthy life, or we should, as we are from the Jain way of life, and strong deviation from that really is the heart of this practice, or lack of, or not deviating from that.
Yeah, and then the art of dying, things that we don't talk about. There will be a day that all of us will pass. Our souls will move on, and are we ready for that time? Do we have that conversation with ourselves, with our family? Dying with dignity is something really important, especially when technology comes in the way, ventilators and procedures. I had a patient who was 94 years old and debated, should we put him on the ventilator? Should we, keep things going? For what purpose, right? Very unclear. And then the last two practices that relate to society, that comes from our tradition, charity. We in our Jain tradition, compared to other traditions, may not do this as much as other traditions may, but we really need to think and prioritize. We know that there are great health benefits. And then lastly, our practice of environmentalism. We could not have imagined a decade ago that climate change would be coming at such incredible speed. And so that is where our scriptures are very clear that we need to pay attention to those environmental factors as well. And that is part and parcel of our practices. And so I will pause and for our final conversation, final few minutes together, say that what we have done is a journey from the philosophy, apanne baatein kari, theory of life, soul, karma, moksha. Apan baat bhi kar sakte hain drav aur tattvas. We could have had a complete detailed conversation on scripture by scripture, but we did it in a different way. Put it in the context of words that are familiar, that can help our next and the next generation begin to see Jainism in a different light. We talked about the triple A's, Jain principles, and then aaj apan ne baatein kari, the practices, the Jain practices, 24 of them, we've just put 10 of them here, which come from each one of the principles, and just propelling this Samyak Darshan, Samyak Gyan, Samyak Charit, Jain way of life with the rituals and festivals. And we've talked about happiness, equanimity, and moksha. So with that, I want to pause and have thoughts and comments from you, Yogan Bhai, and others as we finish up on our final conversation on the Jain path and Jain way of life.
Now, I'd love to hear from the folks out there, but I do want to say just one quick thing, that some people have said that perhaps we might be deviating from the Jain core practices or this what's in the scriptures and so on. But by no means that has been our intention, and we believe that we are really not doing that. It is continuing to strengthen and bring to the contemporary Jain way of life a lot of our Jain findings or Jain practices.
Great. Any last comments and thoughts, Hitesh ji?
Yeah. See,
Please.
I would, out of the all the three principles, I think I find a parigraha to be the most difficult.
Most difficult.
So most
Absolutely.
difficult. How much is enough? That's a big question, right? Whether what kind of balance is enough for your day-to-day life. That's I found it very difficult. Second is it talks about charity. So how much charity you should give, right? I think there is a lot of debate in US also, in India also. Like, for example, Warren Buffett or Bill Gates said that they will donate 75% of their wealth. Will I be able to do the same thing if whether I will be able to, donate 5% of my wealth, 10, 20, 30, 40. I think that is one aspect which I found is how much charity, right? We may be doing charity, right, in our own way, but are we doing sufficient charity compared to our wealth? Okay, so that is second point which I would like to mention. Third, like art of dying. I think that's the most, because everybody in this world is living with the concept that they will never die, right? Let me tell you, that's the basic. People are saying that people are running, people are just hoarding, and I think I find that, that people are not accepted to the art of dying. So I think these all the three things which I feel personally also very difficult, how should we, work on this, how should we, go ahead? I think that's the point I wanted to make.
Beautiful. And that's our purpose. That's our purpose for doing what we're doing. Yeah. It is to open up these perspectives for individuals, and then you see what is important to you and to explore those further. And Yogan Bhai put on the website jwall.org, there are the Jain Path book, the Jain Way of Life book, in fact, has all of this in great detail. So very much so, we would really encourage you to take a look at that as well. So,
hey, Manoj, I wanted to take just a couple more minutes and get feedback from the team here. Does, in the Indian context, because this is for the India, we have a separate one for the US that we do, should we think about doing this more, number one? Or is there any changes that you'd like to see in the format and the way it's being presented? Love to hear your feedback. Is this needed in India, or you have plenty of other resources that are able to get you the same information?
I think I would say, first of all, we should have this. I think only we can think of the frequency, whether it could be fortnight or a monthly, whether it is a quarterly. I think but I think we should have. I think it refreshes us and it gives you so many insights, and it again bring back to your focus, because it keeps on adding a lot of value. So I think my opinion is that we should do it. I think the frequency is what we can decide, as I told you. Secondly, the format, I liked it. I think I love the format. I think it was very lucid, clear. I think maybe we can go a little more slowly, more, we can add more stories, more practical insights could be there, right? Sometimes, it takes a lot of practical tips to get imbibed into oneself, right? Because sometimes, you just, it becomes too fast to get ingrained into your mind. So I would say maybe a little slow, more practical examples, more people can connect to the, reality. Probably, I think if we can just add a little bit, I think overall the format was good.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Other comments, and then we'll do Namokar Mantra and complete our session. Anyone else? Great. So maybe Yogan Bhai, you can finish our session with Namokar Mantra, and then we'll finish up. Sorry, you're on mute. You're on mute.
Sorry, I was calling. Believe it or not, this is sort of my favorite part. Just even a 30 seconds of one, taking a couple of breaths and relaxing. Okay, so again, let's do it. Nice big smile. Take a nice deep breath. Inhale. Hold. And exhale. And let's take a moment to be mindful. Let's say in our own mind, I'm a Jain. I will live a Jain way of life. I have 3 core practices: ahimsa, anekantvad, I'll take the time to respect other views; aparigraha, I will balance my needs and desires. And through that, I'll be able to manage my anger, my ego, my greed, my deceit. And this will not only make me happy, but people around me, and this world will be a happier place. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. And let's do one Namokar mantra. Om Namo Arihantanam. Om Namo Siddhanam. Namo Ariyanam. Namo Vachayanam. Namo Loe Sapsana. Eso Panchanamoyana. Sabba Pava Prashno. Mangala Shanti.
Om Shanti.
Om Shanti.
Jai Jain, everyone. Thank
Jai
you so
Jinendra.
much.
Yeah.
Jai Jain, and we'll keep in touch.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time and effort. We really appreciate. And on behalf of all the participants, I would like to thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great evening, folks.
Yeah.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.